Thank you very much for the opportunity to present this study. My name is George Wu from FIU, and this is the second time I attend this conference. I find it's very informative, very educational, really enjoying the conference. And the difference is that last year my co-author presented the paper, and so that I can really enjoy the conference. And this year I find I have to really work very hard until midnight of last night. This is still a preliminary version of the paper, so we really appreciate very much any comments from you. So in this paper, we examine the impact of bank technology on productivity and employment of banks. So to some extent, this study is not about a study of cramming the exam, like what we learned from yesterday. So it's a study about how banks can be adaptive and using technology to remain competitive in the market. Okay, so technology. We know it's a very important word, right? So let me start with the motivation of the paper. We all know technology is very important. In fact, US banking industry probably is the most technology intensive industry in US. And more recently, technology has become a critical component in bank operation. So if you look at the annual report, or 10K, for US listed banks, and you will see the word of technology repeatedly appeared on the report, which shows that in the CFO, CEO's mind, technology is very important. And also we have a fresh evidence from yesterday. Based on 2018 CSBS National Survey, only 7% of banks consider technology slightly important and not important. So technology is very important. And in this graph, we show that the median technology spending for the banks in our sample. So we have banks with asset size less than $100 million. We have banks with asset size more than $200 billion. So over time, we see there is a monotonically increasing trend for technology spending over time, even during the financial crisis time. So using technology is not an option. Okay, so what do we know and what we don't know, right? So when we look at the prior research, there are a lot of studies related to bank technology. And one important paper is by Berger 2003. And this paper examining the effects of technology on the productivity growth at the industry level. And also the paper study the impact of technology on market structure. Another important paper is by Dion 2010. This paper is about large banks are quicker than smaller community banks to adapt new technology. So it looks like there is a bank size effect in bank using technology. And more recently, we have a lot of research about interactions between fintech company and banks, how fintech company affect bank use technology. Even though we have a growing literature, however, there's a limited evidence on the benefits of technology capital to the net output of banks at the firm level. So why do we care about firm level? Different from industry level, which potentially has aggregation bias. So for us, we have firm level data, which allow us to study impacts of technology on different type of banks, including rural banks, urban banks. They're facing different challenges, different demand, and also for smaller banks, including community banks. Another important issue is about effect of bank employment. I really like Patrick's comments, technology killing jobs, right? We're all concerned about it, but ultimately, technology is also a people issue, right? So we think it's a very important issue to examine how use of technology affect bank employment. So there are many studies to show the worries of technology kills jobs. For example, in 2016, a study by Citibank estimated about 30% of banking jobs will be eliminated from 2015 to 2025. And also, there's some academic study using Spanish banks' data show 1 million euro technology spending will replace about 25 employees. However, there's some other studies showing that this may not be the case. For example, Basin 2015 shows that use of ATM does not eliminate bank teller jobs. Actually, in 1990s, it increased bank teller jobs by a little bit. Okay, so there's a mixed evidence. So if you look at the broader economic literature so that we can get some theoretic guidance on this issue, and in the broader economic literature, some argues technology investment can make labor redundant, especially for those routine jobs. In the context of banking, that would be front office technology jobs. So they replace employment through this displacement effect. So the many studies support that, even including a 1930 study by Kent. Right? However, others argue the opposite. Right? And they think technology can enhance employment through its productivity effect. Why? Because Asimoglu and Restroppo 2018 study suggests that technology adoption can increase firm productivity and generate new tasks. So it can increase employment. So the idea is that humans are very smart, right? We're very smart, so we can control the pace for technology. And some jobs will be lost. However, there are other jobs, other tasks will be created so that the labor has a competitive advantage. All right, so we asked two questions. The first question we consider is the bright side question, which is how technology adoption increase the net output of banks at a firm level. If so, to which extent? So we try to quantify the impact of technology on bank productivity at the firm level. And also, it looks like the answer may be quite obvious, but we think may not, especially for small community banks, because we know use technology is very expensive. Okay, so we want to look at the net impact of use of technology on net output of banks. Also, we can look at the rural banks and urban banks. Another question is we ask, we call this dark side question because it's related to technology replace employment. So we ask, does use of technology destroy banking jobs? Essentially, we ask whether the displacement effect dominates the productivity effect, right? So we think these questions are very important to community banks, as they need to remain competitive in the market. So we use this data source, and this is from S&P Global Market Intelligence. We get the technology spending, and this is a very reliable data source. And in order to estimate the technology production function, we have to convert technology spending variable to technology capital. So this is the production function estimation equation over here. So the key variable is TK. The beta TK measures the contribution of technology to the net output of banks. So we're using 4 different models to estimate the production function. Actually, we find positive results. We have a positive, strong, statistically significant coefficient, which means technology capital make important contribution to bank productivity. At first, you think the coefficient, that may be very small compared to the coefficients for conventional capital. However, if you consider the percentage of technology capital over the total capital, you will think that technology capital make actually pretty strong contribution to bank productivity because the technology capital over total capital is less than 1%. So majority of the capital actually is physical or conventional capital. All right, so we also estimate production function based on rural and urban banks, and the result holds very well. So for both type of banks, technology is very important to increase bank productivity. And more interestingly, we also look at whether the impact will change over time. As expected, we find post-financial crisis period, the contribution of technology on productivity of banks increase. We have a stronger effect looking at the coefficient over there. And next, we look at the correlation between technology and employment. And we are interested in cross-sectional relationship. We're not interested in dynamic relationships. So in order to do that, we regress technology spending and employment on the firm size in using each year data. So we get residual technology spending, residual employment, and then we regress residual employment on residual technology spending. So this is the key variable over here. And again, based on the result, we find a positive relationship between these two. And banks investing more in technology have higher employment. Okay? So intuitively, everything else being equal, we're saying, suppose there are two types of firms, two types of banks. The banks use more technology versus the bank use less technology. And the bank with more technology tend to have higher employment growth. That's what we find. We control for other variables as well. And again, we apply, the next thing we ask why. What's the mechanism? So based on the task-based framework in the 2018 study, and we hypothesize that the reason we see positive correlation between bank employment and use of technology is because use technology create more new tasks or newer version of existing tasks, right? So we use different proxies. And I think this is the area that we like to get more feedback from you, because we find it's very challenging to really measure the bank task, okay? But we try our best. We use loans and deposit. We use net output. We use number of branches, and to proxy the bank tasks. And we find a positive relationship which shows that technology helps banks expand their business. So we also apply to a rural bank, urban bank, and we find a positive relationship. So with a bunch of results, we make sure that results are not driven by merger acquisition, not driven by too big to fail banks, and also not driven by the measure of net output. So it looks like our results are pretty robust. All right, so what do we learn? We learned that technology capital contributes to net output of banks based on firm level study, and for rural bank, for urban bank. And also we find a strong cross-sectional relationship between bank employment and bank technology spending. So what's the implication? What's the takeaway point? And we find even though technology can be very expensive, but for banks with all size, rural bank and urban bank, we should all embrace technology, okay? Because to be adaptive, and the bank technology has become more important after the financial crisis. So it's not about an option, it's about how to use technology wisely. There are always winners and losers. So the question is that you don't want to become a blockbuster. You want to become Walmart or some other companies that really be adaptive in technology. And also we find the use of technology may not destroy bank employment as they can create new tasks. So that's our presentation. Thank you.
Let me start.